Okay, I'm ready to start. That's one end done. That's the other end done. Now I have to get this loop back in position. That's that. Okay, so that's all in position now. Means that the meter drum is now tied to the mechanism correctly. And I will put the top back on here temporarily while I go away and look at the prism, because the prism I have to, or the finder assembly rather, I need to disassemble for cleaning. And I don't want this all falling apart while I'm busy doing that task. Unfortunately, selenium cells on exposure meters this old tend to be fairly useless. They just die of old age. It doesn't mean all of them are dead yet, but it does mean that all of them are suspect. They may look very impressive and they may swing the needle nicely when you point them at the light, but it doesn't mean that they're moving at the right amount. Okay, camera body to one side. I have my finder assembly here. I've got to remove the prism in order to get down to the screen, because the screen is the problem area. I'll remove these three small screws. The one at the back here just holds that black mask in place. The two at the side hold this clamp plate to the frame of the finder thing here, prism body. Now what we've got is a piece of aluminium tape glued to the prism, and there are two rubber buffers glued to the underside of this aluminium hold down. Oh, I don't need to make any decision because it's been made for me, it just flew off. Okay, so it came loose from those points on the foil. Without damage. That's good. Often the foil will lift, it will lift the paint and the silvering underneath it. The tape around the edges here has to come off. Now that tape job is to keep dust and dirt out of the assembly. And basically it just covers the gaps around the base of the prism. The adhesive is old and basically it's given up the ghost. It's not easy to get all these stuff off sometimes. Right, that's the last of it. There's my prism. That looks pretty good. Now there are only two faces to clean on the prism, the rear face and the bottom face. Everything else is covered in paint. I'm looking at that prism, I can see that the silvering is less than perfect. It's got some speckles in it where the surface is deteriorating, but generally it's pretty good. And for one of these cameras, it's a very good example. I don't need to do anything to this, I think. There's a bit of stickiness to that rubber. I'll just wipe those surfaces with a bit of naphtha. Maybe some breakdown product of the adhesive there. Yeah, you can see it's sort of come off a bit brown. Certainly something to do with that old adhesive. I'm not going to strip that and too much to that. Now the screen assembly. There's multiple pieces to the screen assembly. Let's peel this tape off. There's more tape here. Again, it's to keep the dust out of the prism. Someone suggested it was a path of light leaks, but I don't think that's really the case. Yeah, in this case there are three retaining spring clips holding the top component in place. It's a right, let's hook those. Now there'll either be 1, 2 or 3 of those in there, and it probably depended on how things turned out in manufacturing. The tolerances will be fairly tight. Right, let's tip this out. We've got a biconvex lens here. That's glass. Then we've got a separator frame, if you like. Now that's shallower. The steps on this, it's higher at the ends than it is in the middle. The steps are shallower on the top side than the bottom side. In here now we've got this condenser. That's plano convex. We're down to the frame, the screen assembly itself now. There are 6. No, there's not. No, there's 6 small screws. Hold the plastic component in, and they also are used to position the plastic component so that the little prism falls in the middle of the hole in the ground glass. Most disconcerting if it's off to one side by any noticeable amount. I'll just back these screws up. Typically 1 turn's a good number. These screws are lacquered into place but I don't want to put any acetone on them while that plastic screen's in position, because you can imagine the weeping and gnashing of teeth that there'd be if you get acetone on that plastic component. That's just a simple mask that sits on top of the ground glass. And this doesn't want to release, so I'll just give that a little poke in the corner. The tab is clipped right over that ground glass and stopping it from falling in. Here we go, that's what it was. Right, so there's our plastic component. It's completely plain on the bottom side. On the inside, facing up into the finder, that's our split image component. That's very, very delicate. I do not clean that with anything manually, that only gets cleaned in the ultrasonic cleaner. The ground glass screen, the ground side goes to the split image, the plain side goes upwards in the finder, the ground glass side down. There's a little fleck of crap on there that needs to come off, and this body I need to clean. Now I need to clean this with some acetone to get rid of all of this old sticky tape, because if you don't get it off, it'll get even drier and older and it'll crack and crumble and those bits of old adhesive will fall everywhere. So I've got to get all of that off. It's a bit tedious, and I'll take the opportunity to get all the lacquer off those little adjuster screws, and I'll make sure they're backed out as far as they can comfortably go to make it easy to reassemble. But in the meantime, I'll pop this lot aside and start working on this frame. You can see the acetone softens and removes that old adhesive quite well. Even though it's not particularly hard to get the outside of this clear of that stuff, some of it will run down through the gaps and have to be cleared from the inside as well. And one of the most annoying aspects of doing this job is that inevitably you end up with a few fibres of cotton from the cotton buds sticking somewhere, and if it's in the light path and you can see it in the finder, that would be very annoying. So you have to take great care to get as much of that. Particularly a problem around these screws, of course, because they'll pick up the cotton quite well. The main reason I want to get the lacquer off in that position is because it's old and tired, and it will probably just crack and fall off at some inconvenient moment if you don't remove it now. Well, I have the frame cleaned up, removed all those screws, removed the lacquer from them, got the screws back in the case, which is not an easy task, I can tell you. They're very small. They don't want to cooperate. They're only going back into very thin metal, getting them to screw in squarely or at all is difficult. And here I'm just cleaning up the focus screen, the ground glass screen. The clear piece with the split image I've already cleaned. I cleaned that in the ultrasonic cleaner, and I expect that that's good. This piece of ground glass, of course, will also have those little mildew spots on it on the ground glass side where it's in contact with that plastic piece. And it's common for the Retina Reflex S and 3 to have mildew spots in that position, just because of the way things are. So now I've got to get this back in place. Now I know I've got this set in here, split image side up, and I'm just checking the marks here from the screws so I can tell which way that went in the container here. It's a bit difficult to see them, to tell the truth. That's dropped into place. Is it all the way down? Yes, it is. I'm just going to run 2 of these screws in lightly to hold that in position, because I want to use the little rubber blower there to blow any dust off it before I put the ground glass piece in. And as soon as I start blowing on it, it'll want to shift otherwise, so I'll just shift these screws in so that it's held firmly, and I can just give that a puff to make sure there's no dust on it. Likewise the ground glass screen. I'm doing this very carefully on a clean tissue. I'm looking all the time to make sure I've got no dust trapped between the surfaces, because it's exceptionally hard to get them clean. Now on top of those goes this mask. On top of that mask goes the plano convex lens, which I'll just clean now. Right, that's the plano convex lens in place. I'll put its little spacer in place. I've got to get the ends of that to pop into position, because they're not at the moment. That's better. And again, I've got to blow that carefully to make sure there's no dust settled on anything. And the third piece It's not really the third piece, it's the fourth section really, is the lens from the top, which is biconvex and it's symmetrical. So you don't have to have it up one particular way, it's the same both ways. Now these sections are out of focus in the finder, only the screen is in focus. But dust particles are still dust particles you don't want. I'm just looking closely at this piece of glass and I've got to get this thing seated. It has to drop onto that frame, that little support that we put in there. Of course it doesn't want to go. Let's see if I can lift that in, get that in. Okay, it's sitting in there now. I'm checking that once more. It looks okay. And we have the little clips that hold it in position. So all those pieces are in place now. I don't see any offending particles, so that's all good. I can adjust these, run these screws in and shift the plastic split image so that it falls directly into the ground glass, the hole in the ground glass screen. One of these screws is problematic. The slot in it is either clogged with lacquer or just unusually narrow. I can't get my screwdriver in there very easily. So I've got to get it centered in this direction and this direction. Of course, when you're looking down at the finder components here, you're looking at something small and far away. When you're looking through the finder, you're looking at a magnified image of it. And so errors of placement that look exceptionally minor here will become much more obvious when you're looking through the finder. I don't much like the look of that. That surface has got some marks on it. I'm going to disassemble that and have another go with the ultrasonic cleaner. I'm seeing marks on the plastic that I would have expected to go away. Well, after round two, I'm much happier about the appearance of that clear plastic section now. I'm still none the wiser as to why it didn't clean properly the first time round, but it looks fine. I'm running these screws in so that the plastic section with the split image component stays where it's put and doesn't shift relative to the ground glass screen. Well, I better remove this bracket that I'd put there to hold that spring earlier, because it's now in the way of me putting my finder back in the camera. I'll just cock the shutter halfway so that I can get that finder down in position. Now at this stage I'm just wanting to assemble the finder. I've got to pull it out yet and put all the sealing tape around it. But this serves as a good jig to hold it while I'm working on it. And probably notice I've got a shortened top section on here just to hold everything in place. The prism's looking less wonderful when you have a chance to have a close look at it, but it's still quite good as these things go. Let's put that bracket on there. Now there are two small black screws that hold that in place. Lining them up sometimes is a bit of a problem. One of them, and they just hold the assembly together. They're not holding it into the camera. Let's have a look at that. So what I need to do now is check the action of this. And really I want the eyepiece there, which I haven't got, so I'll just use a look and have a look through here and see what I can see. Yeah, well, that told me what I needed to know, which is that the finder is clear and bright and no obvious dust specks. Get this cover on here so the meter can't shift. That's better. Right, so I know that the viewfinder is good. And I need to prepare to put my tape around that. Before I do that, there's a couple of screws I can put into the camera. Since we don't need to get into the front anymore, that screw can go there. This screw can go here. And the black tape. Let's get the black tape out. So I'll get my finder out actually, and we'll just start some work on that. Just half cock that. Half cock it just to bring this bracket over so that it's not catching on the finder, like that. And I'll find some black tape.